Do you have what it takes? Do you have what it takes to join an Eden team? Do you have what it takes to begin to get stuck into incarnational mission? Well, the answer might be that you just don't think you have. I meet people all the time who tell me how much they love Eden, how the model is something that they would love to spend their time doing, but they just don't think they've got what it takes. And maybe that's because they hear that Eden is focused on young people as one of our primary methods for ministry, and they just think the idea of spending each and every night with young people from a disadvantaged community is not really what they're cut out for. Or maybe it's because they just know that they already have a very busy life, a busy job, or a difficult family to contend with, and therefore know they have very limited capacity to be able to serve other people. Or maybe it's simply because their view of a disadvantaged community and the skills and the gifts and the abilities that God has given them just don't go together. But then this is where Jesus is awesome. So Jesus has this amazing ability of taking our gifts and our skills and aligning them beautifully with the needs of the neighborhood. I've seen it time and time again when God calls people into a community that they don't know. They are surprised just how the things that they are gifted with have been given almost for the sole purpose of serving the neighborhood that they've come to support. I've heard of some incredible Eden workers who have made that radical step of downward mobility and have been so perfect for the communities they moved into. There was one lady that I like to call the Eden Granny who retired from life in Chorley Wood and moved to the #1 most disadvantaged community in the country. And there she became this beautiful figure within the community who would open her home to young people and would bake with them and almost be a grandparent to them, something that was so necessary and needed in that community. I've heard about inspirational and creative projects, the Knit and Natter projects. You'd never think anyone from a disadvantaged community would be interested in knitting, but yet when people got together with sticks and wool and began to knit together, something beautiful of the kingdom emerged. There's baking clubs and there's biking clubs, and there's all sorts of things that teams innovate in order to build relationship and to share the good news of Jesus. But what are the needs of the neighborhood? Often we know our skills, we know what we love to do and what we can bring, but it's so important that we take time to listen and learn about what the community that we are moving in to take part in really needs. Instead of thinking we come with the answers, we must listen first to the question that is being asked. Often I like to talk about community exegesis. How do we learn about the neighborhoods that we have moved in to join? It's so important that when we look at the map in front of us, we begin to learn the patch that God has given us to oversee and take a part in, and learn about the nature of it. Before we attempt to meet and address a need, we must establish what needs must be met. In Acts 17, we get to see this learning about community up close and personal. The Apostle Paul arrives in Athens. There he's going to meet his good friends Timothy and Silas. And as he waits, he could have just booked himself into a hotel room, kicked up and watched some Netflix, but yet he loves to get out and about around the city and is instantly learning something of their culture. And it's that which he's going to use ultimately to share the good news of Jesus. Let me just read to you from Acts 17. All the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there spent their time doing nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas. Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, "People of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship. I even found an altar with an inscription to an unknown God. So you are ignorant to the very thing you worship, and this is what I'm going to proclaim to you. See, he gets out and about. He goes from the synagogue to the marketplace. He's taking in the sights and the sounds, and he's beginning to make a judgment about the cultures in which they live, the things that they hold dear to, their way of life. And it's there he establishes his gospel route, his way into sharing the good news of Jesus. He spots this idol right at the center of Athens to a God who has no name, and it's here that he places his gospel testament. It's here that he begins to identify the character of Jesus. When we go into our communities, it's so important that we begin to exegete, to unpack the nature of the communities that we are joining and ensure that we are learning from what we see. We need to ask questions of the history of the place. Why is it the way it is? Where does its name come from? What's its origin? And who are the people that live here or established the place? We need to think about geography. Why was this neighborhood built? What are its boundary lines? Where are the key sort of meeting places? What does the geography tell you about its existence and the people that live within it? It's important that we look at the demography. What kind of people live here? What race are they? Are there multiple ethnicities? What languages are spoken? And that might be evident in the shops in the high street, or it might be evident in the smells of your neighborhood. We need to learn about who we can get access to. Are the streets filled with young people, or are all the elderly people in one particular place? Learn about who lives there and how they live. And that leads me on to culture. What are the cultures within your community? Is it a very matriarchal or patriarchal culture? Is it a culture where people spend time outdoors a lot of the time? You know, in my neighborhood, we used to take out our sofas on hot sunny days and live outside amongst our neighbors. But maybe there are cultures that are unhealthy, some unhealthy practices that can be addressed. Maybe they are cultures that have not been dealt with for generations, cycles that can be ministered to in Jesus' name. And that leads me to the spiritual elements. When we look at the map of our communities, as we begin to walk around, we need to look at the idols. Where are the places of worship? Some of those places of worship may be positive. There may be churches that exist within the community, but there also might be some very negative things. Some idols of worship that have existed in this community and have defined its very existence. So the question is, how do we go about doing this? It's really important that we address our hearts, and as we enter community, we are going humbly and with real teachability. We're inquisitive, asking the right questions, making sure that we don't go with the answers. We're looking for those people of peace, those people who will give us real insight into the community, who will open doors for us to meet people and tell us things about the nature of this community. There are some amazing people with such insight, and it's so important that we establish relationships with them. Not relationships that are arm's length, but intimate. We bring people near. We enter their homes and we get to know them. And as we get to know them, we get to know the community too. We need to review and reflect. Sometimes it's important to step away from our community, to then take time to process what we are learning, to take time to think and reflect and analyze. I actually used to love it when people would come to my community and help me discern what was going on. I'd sometimes ask people what they'd experienced, what smells and sights did they see, because often we can become numb to the very things that are under our nose, and seeing things from a fresh perspective really help us as we continue to learn about our neighborhood. And we filter all these things through the Bible. Often God will give us great passages that help us as we are processing to understand things from His perspective. It's important that we partner with other people. inside our neighborhoods, God will be at work. And God will often have placed people that we can't first see when we move into our community. But it's important that as we begin to establish an understanding of our neighborhood, that we partner those who are already doing great things in Jesus' name. And actually, sometimes those who don't represent Jesus at all, but are doing things that look and smell like the kingdom. Why not join their mission and their ministry before we try and establish our own? And it's so important that we continue to evaluate. Our neighborhoods change, they keep updating. You know, the neighborhood I moved into 20 years looks very different now. And I have to continue the process of learning if I'm going to be able to minister to them in the most relevant of ways. So here's some practical steps. Prayer walk. And keep prayer walking. Sometimes when we walk our streets, we're discerning what God is saying, and we are smelling and seeing and hearing things for the first time that will give us insight into community. We're looking for the stakeholders. Who are those people of peace? The gateholders, those people that will open the community to us. Look and actively pursue them. And maybe do some surveys. Go and knock a few doors. Find something which just is a survey just about learning about your community, and begin to ask people to tell you the stories. Ask for the stories of the community to come out. Tell me what it was like here when you grew up. Tell me what it was like last year. Learn the stories of the community and then become a storyteller yourself. Write down all that you learn. Write down all that you experience. And one of the things I love to do is practically map my neighborhood. I try and write as many names down as I possibly can. I try to understand where people live or where people have moved to or moved from. I try and map out the important places, the places in which people gather, the places in which people worship. I'm trying to detail map everything of my experience. And all the time, I'm trying to understand God's perspective. Why have you called me here, Lord? What have you given me that I can use in this place? Show me, God, this community through your eyes. And as we do that, God will reveal just where we fit in the neighborhood and where we fit in his plans. He goes before us. He's here, existing in the community before we even arrived, and he'll be here long after we move on. But when we begin to see that God has a plan and a purpose and that we can join him in it, we will see great and awesome community transformation. God bless.
Thanks so much for watching, we hope you enjoyed. Make sure that you guys don't miss out on anything that we're doing. Like our Facebook page, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and make sure that you turn on the notifications. You don't want to miss it.